Are you throwing a line in the water?
No. I'm going though as soon as we get off.
I'm sure
How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing fine, Wimp.
I appreciate
Hope
you taking time to be on.
Safe and all's well.
If you don't mind, sort of tell our listeners maybe a little bit how it sort of got started with you. As far I know, Scott was down there. I don't know whether it was during that period of time or not, but how it kind of got started in the phone calls or maybe the whatever to sort of get you involved a little bit with the Bulls to start with.
Yeah, Wimp, it all started in 1988, and your son Scott was on our staff at the University of New Orleans. And you wouldn't remember this, but we had the smallest team in the country, and we were at a 6'4" center, and we played Louisiana Tech 3 times that year, and they had a big guy, Randy White, 6'9", who ended up being a lottery pick with the Dallas Mavericks. And they also had P.J. Brown, that was a freshman, who was 6'11". And Jerry Krouse scouted Randy White 3 times that year, and they were all against us. And after the third ball game, he came up to me and said, "Look, I just want to introduce myself, and I'm from the Chicago Bulls, and I'll let you know you're going to be our next head coach." And I thought, wow, that's, that was a nice compliment, but probably not going anywhere. And I don't think he had a real understanding that small guys could beat big guys, and we had really talented players, but they were all small. And anyhow, he started calling once a week from '88 to about '93, and he wanted me to fly up to Chicago and learn the triangle offense. He thought that was, had a big part to do with why they were winning. He believed that the system of play that he had insisted that they try to run up there was why they were winning. And he had hired Tex Winter, and Tex Winter had implemented the triangle. And if you saw in one of the earlier episodes, that's why why Doug Collins lost his job, because he would not run the triangle with Michael early in his career. So he had always had a meeting. And the coach in waiting was Phil Jackson, that he brought in from the CBA. And Phil got close to Tex, studied the triangle. When Phil felt like he knew it, they fired Doug, even though he'd gone to the Eastern Conference Finals, and hired Phil at that time. So he was his coach in waiting. And then I was, the coach in waiting for Phil. And that was a 10-year deal. And about 93 or 94, he started calling 4 or 5 times a week. And they would be hour-and-a-half long conversations. 95, he said he needed to get to know me on a personal level. And so that's what I like to do. And he flew down here and fished one time. I told him I like to fish, and he didn't know how to fish. And so we fished one time. But I became his fishing buddy to the media, because he used it as a dismissive comment when the media would ask about his infatuation with hiring me. Of course, I didn't want any of that information out, because I was trying to coach my college teams and really wasn't sure that I wanted to do it. Just had no real desire. It wasn't a burning desire, although I sure kept the relationship going, because it was flattering, number one. Number two, wasn't sure I wanted to, buy a cemetery plot at the University of New Orleans, and I wanted to maybe have a bigger job one day. So it was always good to have somebody like Jerry Krouse on your resume if you were trying to move. And so anyhow, we fished one time. I met Jerry Reinsdorf in '96. That was the next step. Flew up to the Seattle series, the finals in '96, and Jerry Reinsdorf and I walked around downtown for 2.5 hours. And at the end of that conversation, he said, "What are your thoughts on coming up right now?" And this was the 72-win team. And Jerry Krouse was insistent on breaking it up then for 2 reasons. One, he wanted to get value for his players, because he felt like they were getting long in the tooth. And number 2, he and Phil were were at odds, which I'm not saying anything that Phil hadn't said, and they just couldn't work together anymore. And I told Jerry Reinsdorf at the end of that conversation that I would not be comfortable coming into that situation. He shouldn't be comfortable trying to break it up, because that team was bigger than anything I'd seen in my lifetime. But I thought certain teams and certain players should be able to die their own natural death. And he said, "Would you tell Jerry Krouse that when the series is over?" I said, "Yeah." So they called me, and I told Krouse that, and he was upset. He said, "I can't work with Phil anymore. Don't want to do it." And they worked out a deal where Jerry would not always office at the Berto Center, that he would office sometimes downtown, but just stay away. And they went on and won 2 more championships against Utah. Long answer to your question.
Wow.
No, that's a great answer, though. We were wanting to know.
How difficult was it, Tim, to go in there after all that broke it up? I mean, maybe people blamed you unfairly. I mean, you were just a coach coming in there. Just how difficult was it coming in there when all the players, I guess Jordan, Pip, and all those guys were gone now? How was it?
Well, it was extremely difficult. I went in there hopeful that I was going to coach those guys, Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and Kerr and Buechler and the whole group. But they elected to blow it up. We had a lockout. It started in May, and they had a lockout, and we didn't start playing till February. But I remember the first question I got at my press conference, after the press conference was over, I had to meet with the media individually. And I walked into this huge, gymnasium room, and I had to be 400 people. And my press conference was televised live nationally. And so now I have to do the individual sound bites. And I said, "Well, who looks harmless out here? Let me see." And there was this, sweet-looking gal, about 27 years old, looked like she'd just gotten out of journalism school. And I thought, okay, let's start there, because a lot of them look like barracudas to me. And her first question to me on the air was, "How does it feel to be the most hated man in Chicago sports history?" And I had not coached a game yet.
Wow.
So it was, it was arguably the most difficult job that anybody's ever walked into in the history of pro sports, just because of the team's popularity, the celebrity level of their players, their following. There was a real mystique about that group.
Tim, I know you certainly have a lot of respect for Jerry, because he hired you, wanted to hire you, and did, and you did as good a job as you could do. Was the fact that he was jealous of the coach? Was it from an outsider like me looking in? I've never discussed this with you, because I've always wanted to, but it's none of my business until this came out, I guess. Was Jerry at fault at all? Was it all coach?
I'm sorry. Did you say was it Jerry's fault at all?
Did Jerry have any? Did he have any fault in disliking Coach?
Well, you may
not want to answer that. If you don't.
No. Jerry, is really portrayed poorly in this series, as you guys are watching it. And the media's always got to have a villain. And it wasn't enough to just write about every win that the Bulls were having. It wasn't enough to write about every loss that we were having, when I was there. So you had to have a story. And you had some assassins in the media, that were tough on them. But Jerry had a quirky personality. Socially he was awkward. But I will say this in defense of him, because he is not alive anymore, and he's getting killed in this series. He did a fabulous job. There's a reason why they're having this series. They're talking about the greatest sports franchise of that time, up until New England's run here. They were incredible. They would have won 8 championships instead of 6. So somebody put those players together. he never felt like he got the credit because he didn't draft Michael. But he did some fabulous things. Great contracts. That's his job for the owner. He got great contracts from Michael and Scotty. And let me tell you, there was some resentment by those players toward the GM because of the contracts. They wanted them blown out, and that's why they were attacking him, in my opinion. Any GM that gets the best of a player in those situations, the player ends up being mad at the GM, and they want a new contract. They really should be mad at their agent. But they took it out on Jerry publicly, and I don't know that Phil always defended Jerry, publicly, and he started helping the players negotiate their contracts in the media, which upset Jerry Reinsdorf. And because there was a protocol. Owner, Jerry Krouse reported to the owner, and the coaches and scouts reported to Jerry. And maybe the protocol was broken, see. And then, when to Jerry's credit, he really felt like they were going to become the Celtics if he didn't blow it up. And they did. They did become the Celtics, who became very bad. I'm talking about after they lost Bird and Parrish and McHale. So, when you think about those players, Wimp and Barry, after they left in '98, they really didn't do much at their other destinations. So it had run its course when it did end in '98, in my opinion.
We're talking with Coach Tim Floyd. One of the things that made me think about you last night, Coach, when watching this series, if Jerry Krouse liked somebody, Pippen and Jordan were going to try to destroy him. That Tony Kukoc deal there where they went after him and said, hey, me and Scotty got him. It was known that Krouse liked Marley. So when they played Phoenix, Jordan said, I'm going to destroy Marley. Just talk about that. Did that make it hard on you because you were Jerry Krause's guy? You didn't have to coach those guys, but those guys were popular really across the world. And I mean, there was probably so many Chicago Bulls fans. How was that for Tim Floyd?
Well, I never actually coached those guys.
Right,
so
right. I know that.
But I will say this about those two players. Every coach would want a player that was as loyal as Michael was to his coaches.
Yeah.
When you think about it, he was extremely loyal to Allbeck and then Doug Collins and then Phil. And I think that was in his DNA. That, okay, this is what you want done. I understand as the best player, I can blow this team up if I don't buy in. And winning was to his core. But they made some comments, the media calling me Pink Floyd, that kind of thing. And look, you got to understand, I wasn't calling Jerry Krouse. He was calling me.
Right.
He called me 5-6 times a week, and I still, up until right at the end, I really didn't think I wanted to do this. I was flattering, but I knew that it was going to be extremely, extremely difficult. But in those days, guaranteed. And that contract that I signed, I knew would change our family in terms of the long haul because you never knew what was going to happen as a college coach. But it was challenging media-wise to try to not have it out there that Jerry was interested in me because I had to recruit and I had to sign players. And my loyalty was to the school that I was working for. But Jerry said some things that made it difficult on himself. The organizations win championships, etc. But I'll say this: he did some fabulous things. The first GM to hire a strength coach. The first GM to hire a team psychologist. The trade he made for Oakley for Cartwright was very difficult publicly. They didn't want him to do it. Signing Rodman when Popovich and Chuck Daly really couldn't make it work with him. That was not popular in Chicago. But I think they don't win the first 3 championships without Cartwright. I think they don't win the last 3 without Rodman. The strength of negotiating those contracts. By doing that, they were able to go out because they got Pippen and Jordan cheap for the first 8-10 years. They were able to sign guys like Ron Harper, coach, and add to the depth which you have to have in the NBA. So he did a great job. He's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. I find it a shame that he's just getting killed in this series, but that's the nature of this whole thing, and it sure is fascinating to watch from knowing what we knew about it.
Yeah, Barkley's come out and he says, "Don't blame Jerry Krouse, blame Reinsdorf." He was the main guy, and he's the one that didn't want to pay these guys. So I think he's thinking Krouse is getting too much flack for this thing blowing up. I want to get your comment on what Barkley said there.
Well, they were paying Michael at the end. I think he was making $35 million.
Yeah.
He was making that a year, but Pippen was coming up for contract. Rodman was coming up in free agency. Luke Longley was coming up. Steve Kerr, Buechler, and I posed the question: how much did those guys do after they left? Would they have been worth tying the franchise up for 4 or 5 years at big money? Okay, to try to win another one. I think that as you recall, Pippen had back issues.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of issues. There were issues with Dennis, becoming a little bit more controversial along the way. So, and Michael, I think, was 34 or 35, and Michael, I think, was pretty much done at that time also. You heard him say that he wasn't going to play if they had to carry him out of the building.
Yeah.
And he had told Jerry Reinsdorf, I think, right after the last Utah series, he was done. On the plane on the way back, and Jerry Reinsdorf told him, said, "Look, we're going to have a lockout. Why don't you just take a step back, take your kids to school every day? You're going to get tired of doing that and playing golf. You don't want to be Magic and retire and come back, come back. Let's go ahead and take a pause and look at it in February." And so I was hired in May. That was the whole lockout year, and I was really hopeful that we might have Michael back, and Dennis and Scotty and I was going to get to coach those guys. But we had an entirely different roster. We were the first team to go young in the NBA. Everybody's young now. Kobe and Kevin had just come out, and we had the lowest salary cap teams and the youngest teams in the history of the league. And to their credit, they told the media, we're going to be very, very bad because we want to get the first pick or the second pick in the draft, and we build it like we did in the 80s. The difference is we didn't get Pippen and those kind of players. So we got a little lesser player, and we were playing against older players at that time, and it was a difficult time in our career because what you're trying to do as a coach is win games, and that's the essence of what you do. So anyhow, glad I did it in retrospect. Would I have done it had I known that we were going to be coaching 18-year-old guys? Probably not. I could have done that in college.
Yep.
Well, I don't want to take up all your time. I know you want to go. I'll call you tonight, and visit with you. But we played Michael the year he won the national championship. We played so well against him. We held him 11 points. I was proud of that. Was there anything at all that you enjoyed as you look back on it that was that made you glad that you did it?
Well, I tell you what, I met some fabulous people. Chicago's an incredible town. Jerry Reinsdorf was very, very good to me. It was intriguing learning how NBA franchises work and think, how they make their decisions. I had my players couldn't have been better guys. I had some really good guys. Guys that are still friends that I still talk to. I learned a lot about myself. I learned that patience was going to be critical throughout that entire few years. I know that what I learned about coaching is players are really unrealistic when they're winning, and they're very, very vulnerable when they're losing. And you find yourself treating them almost better when they're losing than they do when they're winning. And I was a coach that coached hard and coached every play and made players accountable. And at that level, I found myself counting to 10. Quite often, in coaching, because the reaction to that was going to be something that was going to take on a life of its own, particularly with losing, the losing that we were doing during those years. So I feel like I grew as a coach. I grew in terms of learning systems of play. It helped me as a college coach. It's really funny. When I went to the pros, I was a college guy. But when I went back to college at Southern Cal, I was a pro guy. And then that helped me with recruiting and getting players along the way. So every experience, you grow from. And that's one I certainly grew from. And Jerry Reinsdorf and I are still friends. And I still got a lot of friends in that league. And at the same time, when I pass away, it's probably going to be the first line of my obituary. That's the only place we didn't win. We had some pretty good teams at other places. But it's like I said earlier, as a coach, really, losing is painful. It's the worst part of the business. And the essence of what we try to do is win. That's it, period. So because of that, it was really painful throughout those entire seasons. And the free agency became very, very frustrating because the collective bargaining agreement changed. And Jerry Krouse, I think, thought because the Bulls brand, we'd sign whoever we wanted. But with the collective bargaining agreement changing and the high school kids now coming out at the same time, we were unable to overpay a free agent. And prior to that time, you could go pay a guy $20 million more than the other team and sign him. You couldn't do that then. And there was a cap level in terms of what you could pay a guy. So Tim Duncan, a Grant Hill, a Tracy McGrady, we were getting our brains beat in, and they were saying, no, I'm not going to go over there and get beat. I'll just stay here where I am. And they rewarded guys that stayed home with one more year and more money. So it made no sense. And we got in that cycle of the lottery, which is about a 7-year marriage when you go in.
Talking with Tim Floyd. Tim, last question. Watching this series, is there anything that you see and you say, man, I had no idea that was going on in that situation?
I had forgotten some of the stories.
Yeah.
I had forgotten about the Vegas trip with Rodman.
Yeah.
That was kind of interesting, but I remember the guys telling me about it when I got back over there. So much of it I already knew. I know one thing that became crystal clear to me last night, the book, The Jordan Rules, that really stung Michael and his image. Mm-hmm. And it was written by Sam Smith. And Michael said that, I'm feeling the pain for something I didn't do or something I haven't said. And so he called out Sam Smith. And having been around Sam Smith those 4 years in Chicago, I found that he was a guy that would never let the facts screw up a good story. So I kind of agree with Michael totally on that deal. And the guy made a buck off of him. And I think that it was really probably unjust and unfair. I look at Michael and how he held those players accountable and how talented he was and the competitive drive mixed with the athleticism and the talent and the will to win. And that's what separates the great ones. He truly was, incredible. And I wish I had the opportunity to have gotten to know him on a different level and coaching, but, didn't work out. But it was truly greatness. And I hope these young guys that have heard their dads and their granddads talking about Michael being the best, that would always disagree with them about, go to the current generation, LeBron and all that. I think they probably have a little different level of respect having watched this because he was really, really something. And as a coach, Wimp and Barry, you guys understand when your best player holds other people accountable. To me, that's a strength and not a weakness. And Sam Smith was talking about how, Michael was too hard on his teammates, and punching Steve Kerr. He always needed an edge in controversy in order to get himself going again. And I loved seeing that part of him in this series. And I wish there were more players like that. So many of them just want to be liked versus respected. And Michael didn't care about being liked. He cared about winning. And the staff that I retained, that was Phil's staff, told me that all I needed to do, if we did have the opportunity to coach Michael, was to let him handle the end of the first meeting. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, Phil used to put them all in a circle in the team room, and he'd go around and ask them their individual goals and team goals. And, one of them would say, I want to be on the all-defensive team. I want to lead the league in rebounding. I want to lead the league in three-point percentage and win and win and win. And he'd have Michael be the last guy, and Michael would stand up and say, to hell with all your individual goals. We're playing for one reason and one reason only, and that's to win and win championships. And I happen to think that practice is the most important part of winning championships. And as a result, when you guys are saying that your knee is banged up or your lower back or you've got a hangnail, I'm going to be out there practicing. I'm going to be playing more than all you other guys. So if I'm practicing, I expect you to practice. So let's go practice right now. And he set the tone. And to me, that's greatness. And there's too many players that are so worried about being liked and can't get out of their own shadow right now. They can't get over themselves to do that for a team. And there's a lot that young people could learn by watching the series. Just taking it out step by step by step along the way. I mean, he gets cut from his high school team, but doesn't quit and transfer and go to another school.
Yeah,
he goes to work harder. Those type of lessons. But anyhow, I'll probably talk too much.
No, what's amazing to me is that guy could play golf all day, stay up all night and play cards, and still come ready to play. That part, it smoked cigars. But when it came time to walk across those lines, he was ready to go. And now most guys can't do that, can they, Tim?
No, they can't. No, he was special. He was really, really special. But I tell you what, you look at some of those other guys on his team, they were pretty talented also.
Yeah, they were.
I mean, they had a group, and what was so underrated was how good they were defensively. Just their length and their size and their speed and their toughness. And Phil doesn't get enough credit for being a really good defensive coach in addition to offensively and handling those guys. I mean, good gosh, I don't know. I don't know if the Buddhism helped or the Native American stuff and the chants and all that they were doing, but he sure did a nice job of managing them. And Michael alluded to that when he was out playing golf, during the season. He said Phil made the right call, not having us practice today.
Yeah.
And he sure understood the guys and what they needed.
Well, Coach, we appreciate your time so much. Good luck fishing today.
Thank you so much.
All right,
appreciate it, Tim.
Thank you.
Y'all stay safe. I always enjoy talking to you.
See ya.
Take care.